In this episode, we discuss the tragic truths of abusive relationships.
We discover just how common abuse is in our culture and in others.
We establish the difference between a dysfunctional and an abusive relationship.
We have a long chat with the executive director of a domestic violence shelter.
We gain serious insights, hear some tragic tales, and share resources for getting help. All this and more right now.
Hi, I'm Marco.
And I'm Heather.
We invite you on a journey of discovery as we explore techniques, tools, and inspiration to better our love lives and our sex lives.
Join us as we travel the world, seeking out the stories that can help improve how we do romance and relationships.
Come with us as we discover
how to love forever. Hi. Welcome to today's episode of How to Love Forever, the podcast that focuses on relationships, love, and sex stuff. My name is Heather.
And I'm Marco.
In today's episode, we chat with Beth Flory, Executive Director of S.A.F.E, Nevada.
We were so fortunate to be able to interview her, and she shares from her many years of experience helping women and children escape and heal from abusive relationships.
Some of what she had to tell us is absolutely heartbreaking, but also incredibly inspiring. We think you will find it just as fascinating as we did, and we look forward to sharing it with you.
Warning, however, this episode is a little more heavy than normal for us. We will be discussing elements of abuse and violence. Nothing too graphic, but still, there are things that may be painful to hear.
We invite you to listen to it because we feel it is important for all of us to be well educated to avoid experiencing situations such as these. We also understand if you just want to skip to a happier episode. That said, here we go.
Thank you very much for being here at the How to Love Forever podcast. We'd love to welcome to the show today Elizabeth Flory. Can you tell us a little bit about her?
Yeah, a little quick intro. Beth Flory is the Executive Director of S.A.F.E, located in Henderson, Nevada, a suburb of Las Vegas. S.A.F.E is a comprehensive nonprofit serving victims of domestic violence with a 24-hour crisis hotline, emergency shelter, advocacy, counseling, outreach, and education. All of these services are free of charge to victims and their children. Beth has worked at S.A.F.E for almost 13 years in various capacities, including answering the 24-hour crisis hotline, helping victims enter emergency shelter, children's advocacy, as well as human resources, training, volunteer coordination, and other administrative work. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology and sociology, a master's degree in human resource management, as well as her Society for Human Resource Management certified professional designation. Dang, lady, you've been busy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You sound like a really important person. So what is your...
Why are you talking to us?
Because you guys are awesome.
Oh.
Thank you.
And you're talking about relationships, which is definitely in my wheelhouse.
Thank you. Let's start with just a simple question. So with that long list of accolades and titulages, what is your day like?
So my average day now that I am the executive director of the agency is really helping the community understand what we do, that we exist in the community and we are there to help victims. And I also do a lot of administrative tasks. So that's ensuring that the agency is financially stable. So, applying for grant funding, I have a grant writer I work with, and then just being in the community and soliciting grants and donations for our agency so that we can continue serving victims free of charge.
Is there ever enough funding?
There's never enough funding. But we do a very good job, and we have been around since 1994. So even through the recessions that we've had and all these different challenges, S.A.F.E has continued to operate since that time. So
that is really fantastic.
Yeah.
And, when I asked that question, of course, it sounded like I was trying to be comical, etc., and lighthearted indeed, maybe a little bit. But let's dive into that. When there isn't enough funding, what happens? What gets unserved? What goes wrong?
So when there isn't enough funding for programs such as ours, it honestly, we're in the business of saving lives. Like domestic violence, that can mean abuse of a partner, but that can also mean homicide. So when we don't have enough funding to support programs like these, it literally means people get killed by their partner. And as the agency is, working, it starts scaling back on its employees. Maybe you don't have as many administrative employees to help keep that business running, which then impacts how the business functions. functions if you don't have those administrative employees. And then you start scaling back your staff that are working directly with victims, and it can really impact that ability to serve individuals who truly need help to get out of these situations.
So really, people suffer. They really do.
Yeah.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
And considering on average, most victims of domestic violence are women, though it can impact anybody and has different dynamics in all different types of communities. But on average, it's 1 in 4 women that are victims of domestic violence. So if you're interacting with a group of individuals, most likely one of those people has been a victim of violence in their life, whether that's dating violence or relationship violence of any type.
That is simply tragic. It's a tragic truth in our society that there is so much, I guess what I might call like inherited violence, this sort of hand-me-down behavioral patterns that just keep breaking people over and over again. It's kind of one of the running themes of some of the episodes that we're putting together is how to break those cycles and also how to identify them. What is the earliest sign that you should seek this kind of help?
There are a lot of red flags that you may be in a relationship that is a domestic violence relationship. There are definitely differences between a relationship where maybe you have a lot of differences and it's not the best relationship, or you have a lot of dysfunction in that relationship. But the telltale red flags that you're probably in a situation with somebody who may be an abuser is when that relationship moves really quickly. So, you get to know the person and this person wants to move in with you and be married within a few weeks or a month.
Wow.
They may insist that you stop participating in your hobbies or your school. Maybe you're attending school, they ask you to quit school, or, oh, you don't have to work, you can just quit your job, I'm going to take care of you.
Kind of a trying to control your time sort of situation.
Exactly. Wants you all to himself, guilt trips you when you want to go hang out with your friends or spend time with your friends, accuses you of cheating all the time when you have not been cheating, being unfaithful. They may call and text you throughout the day. They want to know where you are and what you're doing at all times.
Keeping tabs.
They'll criticize you and put you down, say things like you're just crazy or you're stupid, or make comments about your appearance. They can be very jealous. They don't take responsibility for their own behavior. So say maybe you get in a disagreement in your relationship and they won't take any responsibility for that disagreement. And that definitely goes in the case of past relationships. So they're talking to you about their past relationships and it's, my ex is totally crazy, never takes any accountability for their own actions inside that relationship.
Right.
I'm sorry. Are you describing my ex-boyfriend?
No, she's describing my ex-girlfriend.
It's very possible.
This all sounds disturbingly familiar.
And one really big one is that this individual can rage out of control at you, but then be perfectly calm with everybody else. We see that a lot when police are called to a situation. The police will arrive at a situation and the abusive partner can just be like, nothing ever happened, everything is fine, and super calm, like on a dime, like just instantly calm. Whereas then the victim has just been abused, and so they're hysterical.
They're super
emotional. To the police, it can look like the reverse.
Right.
Because the abuser can be calm.
Yeah.
So aren't the police trained to see that sort of reverse counterintuitive dichotomy going on in the social interactions between somebody who's just been like abused and battered or subject to all of these kind of shit behaviors and the person who's trying to cover himself? Like, it's like a kid when he breaks the candy bowl in the kitchen. He's like, yeah, it wasn't me.
It wasn't me. I mean, it was my brother.
I mean, shouldn't that be obvious to a police officer? I'm just asking. Is that something like part of the training regimen that you think like or that is in existence from programs like your own?
Yeah, so we definitely interact with the police quite a bit. We actually have an advocate stationed at the Henderson Police Department to assist victims. Now, with any training, there's so many layers to that, whether they absorb the training. And I hate to say it, we also have worked with a lot of victims who abusers are police officers. So that's not that uncommon actually for an abuser to be a police officer. And police officers work within their rules that they're set to do. So they have a set of rules. You think like the military. You have a set of rules. You enter a situation. You follow those set of rules. And so if they see, maybe the victim has fought back and created some kind of, physical damage to the abusive partner, then they may arrest both parties. So it's very common that we see both parties arrested in these situations. They're supposed to go with this concept of primary aggressor, which is the individual who's most likely to cause harm. But whether that happens all the time, it just does not happen all the time. And that's the honest truth.
So circling back to dysfunction in general, we, in our research, we came across articles that mentioned that there are levels of dysfunction in pretty much every relationship ever. Right? And so what are ways that we can avoid like massive amounts of dysfunction? And I think, what are ways that we can avoid massive amounts of dysfunction, and how to tell the difference between just dysfunctional and we don't have proper boundaries and communication in place, and then when it crosses that line to abuse.
Can I rephrase that question a little bit?
Sure, okay.
Yeah. So we've seen in the articles that we were studying in order to do this particular interview with you is that there is a sliding scale to how much dysfunction there is in a relationship, to anywhere from like, oh no, he doesn't wash the dishes, or he lies about, I don't know, masturbating, to, he's coming at me with a machete in the middle of the night. And obviously that's a real horror story, and I don't mean to make light of it. It's an actual example.
So just so you know, a good friend of mine who is a survivor, her partner used to sit and sharpen his machete and make threats at her at night. So I absolutely believe that example.
Jeez.
Yeah. No, I wasn't kidding. I mean, people die because of the relationships they're in. This is not good.
Oh, yeah.
But again, so you were talking about warning signs, and I think a lot of us can relate to those warning signs. But say, for example, little 20-year-old Heather, when she first got into this committed relationship that quickly descended into severe dysfunction and then onto abuse, what could she have done differently, and how could she have seen the signs that it was going to head in such an unhealthy direction?
So definitely knowing those red flags is probably the first step. Now, there's a kind of an analogy that's used a lot in our world about the frog put into a boiling pot of water.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if you've heard this one before, but
Yeah.
You throw, if you put a frog in a pot, for our listeners, if you put a frog in a pot of water and you slowly increase the heat, it will not jump out and boil to death. But if you throw the frog in while it's hot, it'll jump out immediately, right? With a lot of these relationships, this isn't necessarily something that happens immediately, right? Mm-hmm. It can be this kind of slow-moving coup, if you call it, where they just start doing these insidious types of behaviors, and then before you know it, you're in the middle of this abusive situation. Now, probably the most important thing to think about in a dysfunctional relationship versus a domestic violence relationship is power and control. So in a domestic violence relationship, it is 100% about power and control over the other partner. Whereas in a dysfunctional relationship, you may not like what each other do. You use the washing the dishes example. Some people are raised differently in how clean they are and how often they're going to clean up the house, or how they communicate with one another can even be different. But there is still some form of mutual agreement in that relationship. I say in a domestic violence relationship, it is one person who is attempting to insert complete control over the other person.
That's pretty clear cut.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's clear cut. One of them is a difference in preferences, perhaps, and the other one is literally struggle for control of that human being. Is that what you're saying, sort of?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. From personal experience, I found it incredibly difficult to... So I didn't come across the term gaslighting until many years later, but it definitely, in retrospect, it seemed as though my ex-boyfriend was trying to get me to believe that nothing I understood was real and that I didn't know my own mind. So then leaving him was, I didn't know what to believe anymore. So it was incredibly difficult to see that I was in, such an abusive situation. I had a group of friends who did an intervention, and I was at a point where I was like, something has got to give, something has to change. And fortunately, they were there at that time, and they did an intervention with me, and it took hours of communication and like drawing me out to realize, oh my gosh, I'm that girl. How did I become that girl? Right? Like that was so mind-boggling to me. Like it completely shook my worldview.
That was a different guy, by the way, not me.
Yeah, very, very different. 180. But so what are techniques that you employ to help people realize that they're in those situations and that they need to seek an exit strategy or help in some form?
Yeah, what are interventionist tools, basically, that you can help pry a person out with?
Well, one of the biggest things is we can't force anybody out of their situation. It's all about self-determination. So, our role, say when a victim calls our crisis hotline, for example, and they're describing to us, we ask them to describe to us like their most recent incident of abuse. And so through that, we'll end up chatting with them just about, the situations occur and how this is not part of, a loving, healthy relationship. And we also will often use the statement in other situations, such as yours, where we've seen this type of behavior, XYZ. It makes us very concerned for you, because these individuals in your similar situation often end up harmed or even killed. And we're very concerned for you. And just really honestly taking the time to listen to their story and what they have to say about what's going on, and then helping them understand from our perspective that this may not be a healthy relationship and this is an abusive relationship, and then giving them the options of what's available via services, whether that is, coming into an emergency shelter, which can be a very difficult choice to make, and then safety planning with the individual. So one of the most dangerous times in a relationship is when you decide to leave. That's usually when the abuse escalates. And so we'll sit and talk through safety plans on, okay, maybe right now is not the time you want to leave, but maybe you'll want to a couple weeks from now or a month from now. So let's talk about what that looks like and how you can prepare yourself safety-wise to leave that situation, because it can be very dangerous. And it takes anywhere on average like 7 to 9 times for somebody to leave that type of relationship. You think about any partner, I've had many relationships, not abusive relationships, and to choose to leave them was hard in itself. Right. And it wasn't even abusive. Yeah. So, you're in a situation where you're literally fearful for your life, or you're questioning yourself because this person has told you you're crazy, or you talk to them about a situation and they tell you you're wrong, or you point out that they did something and they just are like, nope, I didn't do that, even though you literally saw them do it. That can even make it more challenging when it comes time to leave that situation. So really it's just having real conversations with people that are sometimes challenging and difficult to have.
Incredibly.
There's a couple of things that you just pointed out that I think I want to touch on. I mean, for one thing, that whole situation just sounds Orwellian to me, where you are in a cycle of abuse that you don't even see because you're so conditioned. And, it takes somebody else to say, hey, man, you're getting abuse, and that person is going, no, the victim's going, no, I'm not. Maybe it was my fault. All of those classic things. But the fact that it also sounds like some kind of World War II movie where they have to plan their escape like they're in a Nazi death camp or something. Like one day you dig a hole like just a tiny little bit and then you take the dirt out, that kind of situation. And then the next day you take another spoonful of dirt out until you've made an entire tunnel that you can like get out of there safely, because otherwise you might die if you just try to do it like that very night, when you first discover.
Yeah.
I've never been in this situation, but it sounds to me like this would be one of the hardest points in that relationship, is not cluing the aggressor in to the fact that you're preparing to make your move.
Yes, and some of those safety plans have to be quite elaborate. So there's actually a couple movies that show this really well. One of them is Sleeping with the Enemy with Julia Roberts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
Her safety plan is extremely elaborate.
Right.
But it is an example of a very good example of one where she, hides belongings before she leaves. She ends up escaping by pretending that she drowned, basically. Yeah, took swimming classes undercover. Now, the movie Enough with Jennifer Lopez.
Okay.
That is another example, but she takes hers to a bit to the extreme.
Okay.
I don't recommend her final action in that movie, but she does also have amazing examples of safety planning in that movie as well.
Yeah.
That is interesting. I don't know. The only movie I've ever seen Jennifer Lopez in is actually called U-Turn, and that's another totally crazy dysfunctional relationship movie. I don't know if you've ever seen that one, where Sean Penn gets stuck in the middle of the Arizona desert because his car breaks down in this tiny little town. And while his car is getting fixed, he meets J-Lo, and of course she is like the captive wife of, this crazy abuser, like real estate agent guy. And anyway, it all becomes like this whole escape from the dysfunctional small town relationship that she's in kind of plot, like with Sean Penn once his car gets fixed. And it is like just the worst example of how to make a getaway from a dysfunctional relationship that you could ever see. Jennifer Lopez, Sean Penn, U-Turn. Watch it, and then tell us that I'm right, that it is not what to do because they all end up dead. Okay, spoiler. No, but not meaning to make light of that, but yeah, it does seem to be. I mean, for somebody like me and like Heather, who strives for a certain amount of just like sense and technique and mutual respect in a relationship, this all sounds wildly Hollywoodian,
Oh yeah, some of the things that I would see when I'm really glad I spent time working actually in our emergency shelter and helping survivors get into that shelter is because the things that I saw would just blow your mind. Like any way that a person can control you, they will do it. Yeah. So, that is, say you're an undocumented immigrant, they will threaten to call ICE on you.
Yeah.
Like we had plenty
that's a big one to hold on you. That's so common in that community.
Yeah. Threaten to take your children away from you. Mm-hmm. If you're in an LGBTQ relationship, they'll threaten to out you to your employer, to your family if you have not come out with your sexuality yet. That's really common. If you have a disability, say that you're hard of hearing and you have hearing aids. I've seen somebody break hearing aids or take away somebody's wheelchair so that they literally cannot leave the house. So it goes even beyond like physical assault, right? It can get into that. Whatever way they can control you. I've seen glasses broken so that you literally can't see where you're going.
So basically any liability you have, which translates to almost like the examples you've been putting out, is any deviation from the norm is something that can be leveraged against you in a control situation. And
I don't even know if it's about deviation from the norm, but any trigger point, any supposed weakness,
liability
that, or whatever your fears are, because I know friends who can't get out of a relationship because they're afraid of not having enough money. I'm sure that's incredibly common.
That is probably the major reason. And you get in this kind of interesting dynamic, too, when it comes to children, because one of the control tactics is through reproductive coercion. So, breaking condoms and I see Marco putting his hands on his face. Oh, yeah, we've had abusers go to like the gynecologist with the individual and basically kind of put this individual into having children they don't even want. Now you have multiple children. You've been prevented from having a job that is either like, oh, honey, you don't have to work. So now you've been out of work for a while. It's hard to get a job. Or we've had abusers actually go to the job and cause so many problems that an individual is fired from their place of work because of that situation. We try to educate the community on that quite a bit. Wow. But so then you have no source of income and you have, several children you have to take care of. So you start weighing your options. And with most mothers, I know they would put themselves on the line for their children. Like I'd, throw myself in front of a car for my children, right?
Yeah.
Kind of comes with being a mother.
I don't have any children, but most mothers I know. So then you start to think about, okay, I have no financial way to take care of my children. I'd rather put myself in harm's way because maybe he's not abusive to the children. so that they're taken care of and they have food and they have clothes and stuff like that. Because to leave and go to, a shelter program, we mentioned that safety planning, usually you can only take maybe a suitcase of stuff or a backpack of stuff. It is also very common that we have individuals come with just the clothes on their backs, and that's it.
Literal refugees from their own
Yes.
lives.
And another tactic abusers will use is destroying documentation. So shredding driver's licenses and birth certificates and social security cards or immigration paperwork so that you literally don't have the documents to be able to go get employed. So that's one of the things we work with clients is I am constantly signing checks for getting a new driver's license or getting your birth certificate requested from another state.
It's like the opposite of doxing someone, it's like nixing them. That's crazy. That
I mean, that makes me admire what you and your nonprofit and all the others who fill those roles. What you do is so incredibly, painfully important.
And heroic.
I
mean,
appreciate
saving
that.
one life is heroic enough. And, when you turn it into your avocation and you do it over and over and over again, one human being at a time, oh my God, thank you.
Yeah, my advocates who work directly with clients, particularly those who, attend court hearings and stuff, I really, really give it to them because they hear this stuff in these stories. If you can think of something to do to harm somebody, somebody has done it, right? And so, we have employees whose clients have been killed by their abusive partners. And you see it in the news sometimes before they even hear it. Like they're sitting there watching the news and all of a sudden this news article comes up and it's like, oh shoot, that's my client.
So
it's
that's not, so I was going to say that's a lot of PTSD for your clients and everybody who, is getting out of these abusive relationships. But how do you and how do the people you work with keep your emotional landscape healthy and not incredibly dark all the time?
I'm sure your advocates have got some serious gallows humor in order to just keep going.
Like, what do you guys do?
And the most interesting part is that the vast majority of our employees are survivors themselves. It's why they get drawn to the field.
Makes sense.
Or maybe they were a survivor of child abuse or sexual assault or some other form of abuse that's all in the same kind of wheelhouse. We promote self-care a lot. I'm not a marriage and family therapist or a licensed clinical social worker, but I can talk a bit about, there's this thing called secondary traumatic stress or trauma exposure response. So it's basically when you hear the stories of abuse, you can take it in yourself and experience the same aspects of trauma that somebody who actually directly felt that trauma can feel. And so
like
one thing is
surreptitiously internalizing it.
Yes. Yeah. So you hear it and you actually start to visualize it. It can change how you view the world. You may start thinking all men are bad, for example, right? Because you hear so many stories of times where men are bad, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, we have really good medical coverage that I do not charge the employees for their medical out of their paycheck. And part of that includes behavioral health options or mental health services.
Great.
You can go on your phone onto like a virtual counseling if you need it so that the staff can use outlets that way. We constantly have self-care as part of our training program of how to take care of yourself, not put all your eggs in one basket, diversify your interests, go out with friends, keep that work-life balance so that you're not consumed by what we do. Because if you are a survivor who's working in the field, you're also much more susceptible to that because it may remind you of what happened to you in your past when you work with these clients, because you'll hear similar stories. Many things that people do is the same, like how many times I can tell you that people have had their clothing destroyed. I mean, that's real common.
Wow.
One of our people who speak on our behalf said that her abuser would take one shoe so that she couldn't walk out on him of every pair.
What?
But they take that time.
Wow.
Yes.
Sneaky
Yeah.
techniques.
So just whatever you can think of, they will do. And so we really encourage self-care. We do activities around self-care and are just supportive of one another, and also try to recognize when we're not feeling good that maybe we need to take some time off. So we also have a very robust time off package at my job.
That's
so that
wonderful.
You can take days off away from hearing all of these stories and situations.
That's so good. So, what are some resources for our listeners who might be going through an abusive relationship? What can they do? Where can they go to start looking for help?
So, most major cities have domestic violence organizations. If you Google, domestic violence and the name of your city, most likely an agency will pop up. Now, there also is the National Domestic Violence Hotline. The National Domestic Violence Hotline will answer the phone and then direct you to programs that are in your local area. So we actually get a lot of calls from the National Hotline. And I think that has to do with the type of city we also reside in. Las Vegas is a very transient city. We get a lot of people from out of state into our city. And so we will get referrals from that hotline, which is just 1-800-799-SAFE.
S.A.F.E.
S.A.F.E. So that would be 7233.
1-800-799-7233.
Yes.
And yeah, we'll have resources in the show description as well.
Yeah, there's going to be anything you want to send us, we're going to put it in the show description so that people can just click on it if they feel they need to. And
yeah, because there is a lot of information out there too. And even on the websites like the National Domestic Violence Hotline website or the National Network to End Domestic Violence website, they have a lot of tips. If you're a bystander, your family member is in this type of relationship, how you can help them and those red flags. Also, the Power and Control Wheel is a real popular resource in our field because that talks about all the different types of abuse that somebody might experience. And somebody may experience like one of these or maybe all of them. It's different in every relationship, but emotional abuse, economic abuse, sexual, using your children against you, threats and coercion, isolation, intimidation, minimizing, denying, blaming. And then, of course, that physical abuse that is most classic, what people think about.
Yeah, but it comes in so many forms. And I think that for many of us, that's one of the things that made it difficult to understand that it was abuse. Because if you're not getting hit, you're like, well, I mean, it's not really abuse, is it?
And that is exactly the case. And we actually have quite a few of our survivors who call the hotline that we are actually helping them understand that they're in an abusive situation, especially in that specific scenario where this person is controlling all of their finances. They're, calling them all kinds of cuss words all day long, but they don't recognize it because they're not in a physical relationship or a physical abusive relationship. And then you also get into the scenario of culture where, individuals' cultures dictate the level of what they believe is acceptable and not. So you may end up, we have individuals that I would say, if you think of it like a spectrum of abuse, it may be very normal in their culture to be smacked or hit by their partner. But, in our culture, we say that's not acceptable. And of course, we believe that is not acceptable, right? So there's that too of that
better.
cultural balance, if that makes sense.
It reminds me of a time when we were traveling near Asia, and there was a time when we were speaking with a friend that we made there, and she was telling us how when she went to prom, was it? She was our translator, basically, and when she went to prom, it was with a boy, and another boy liked her, and it's sort of as a flirtatious abuse. I suppose he was scarring her with cigarettes.
With a lighter.
With a lighter,
Yeah.
sorry. Burning her with a lighter.
He was upset that she wasn't there with him, even though he was there with another girlfriend. And
this is prom, mind you.
Yeah, so he flirtatiously burned her with his lighter, and the other girlfriend was upset that he was flirting with her.
I mean, she had burn marks to show years later.
It's like, what?
And yeah. So
Not
speaking
cool.
of what is acceptable being culturally determined, yeah. obviously.
Yeah,
And
because it's what you're used to, and that's why even individuals who grew up in abusive relationships are far more likely to end up in abusive relationships themselves, or the abuser themselves, because it's what's normal to the individual. So those they don't sense the red flags because that's just what they normally saw every single day when they grew up. So
yeah,
They're
you're then in a
used to
relationship,
living in
and
it.
this person
Right.
talking down to you is normal because that's how dad talked down to mom or whomever. So it's kind of the same as the cultural aspect where it's what you're used to.
Regional
So
culture,
why
family
would it
culture,
seem
all of
weird?
that. Yeah.
And so it's incredibly important for children to learn from an early age how to set boundaries and what are healthy patterns and what to expect in a balanced and healthy relationship. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's the teen piece and the children's piece. It's an important part of our organization. I fulfilled the role of children's advocate for about 4.5 years. And I had those kind of conversations with, kids and teens about setting boundaries and what is healthy and in those relationships. And we are currently working to try to get into the Clark County School District, which is the school district in the Las Vegas Valley, to be able to teach some of these relationship issues with the teenagers specifically, because the other part of domestic violence, we don't think about it, it is a crime in the United States. So having a dysfunctional relationship is not a crime, but assaulting and abusing your partner absolutely is a crime that can be charged. So it's also knowing your rights under the law.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a combination. So that's something that we're actually exploring right now. And we do have a pilot program with one of the high schools to start that education actually in the classroom.
Ah, that's going to be so good.
Fabulous.
Definitely
Well,
keep
so many
us
things that
updated.
teenagers do, you would think it's awesome. Like, oh, my boyfriend's texting me all day long, all through class. He must love me so much. Or he tells me I look bad in this outfit. He wants to make sure I look extra pretty. Like those are things that, as a teenager seems like awesome, but really
Well, he
it's a
wants
red
to
flag.
take care of me. That's why he's so
Yeah.
controlling.
Once you see it in a different light, you start seeing it as ill will masquerading as goodwill. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Are there any particular resources where you can point people to identify ill will masquerading as goodwill? Is there a chart? Do you guys have a graphic?
There are definitely lots of graphics and charts. First of all, we love our wheels in the domestic violence field when they created.
Yeah, because the only time I ever heard of a power and control wheel, it was at an S&M dungeon. So tell us about your power and control wheel, please.
Which, BDSM, if it's under the, guise of a relationship where you have mutual respect for each other and you mutually want to engage in those activities, it is not domestic violence.
Right. Yeah,
So-
because it's about agreements and it's about open communication, right?
Knowingly entering into it with consent, right? That kind of
Yes,
situation.
consent is the key word there.
Having safe words, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Now, if you have one person who's in the partnership who wants to engage in those type of activities and the other person does not and forces them into that, well, then it's no
Coercion
longer.
is abuse.
Yeah,
End of story.
coercion is abuse, exactly. So again, you get on the internet, you Google red flags of domestic violence, or you Google power and control wheel domestic violence, then those resources pop right up. You could do an image search on the power and control wheel and it will come up. It is a very famous infographic, if you will, that's been around for ages before infographics were popular.
Yeah, thanks for letting us know about that one. I never knew, and we
I-
will definitely Google it, and I'm going to make a copy of it and stick it in the Facebook How to Love Forever site, just so that it's there for people to just look at and ponder whether or not they themselves might be in an abusive relationship. It's good to be able to identify it in others.
Yeah, and there's even power and control wheels for different situations too. So like if you're in a LGBTQIA plus relationship, how the different types of abuse a person might use. Also for immigrant status, if you're an undocumented immigrant, the types of techniques they may use. Different cultures, different religions, they even have power and control wheels for, so that you can just see kind of the nuance of the ways that people control each other, essentially.
Yeah. No, that's. I'm very excited to look that up. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Well,
And I can
It's
definitely
incredible.
share you all of that so that you
Yeah.
have it to be able to put in your link so that people can
Yeah.
read. And then I think the only other one that's really important to know is about the cyclical nature of abuse, which is there's an actual like phase that most abusers will go through where they have a honeymoon phase where they're super nice and loving and buy you flowers and take you out to dinner. And I'm so sorry, baby. I love you. I don't know what I did. I
the
don't know what I
perfect
was
fairy
thinking, blah, blah,
tale.
blah.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
there's that tension building where, you start feeling that abuse come on. They start saying and doing things, irritability, blaming, those types of activities. And then you'll have that acute explosion. And then it turns back to the honeymoon phase, which is, again, why it's so difficult to leave relationships, because when they're in that honeymoon phase, it is the best part of your life.
Yeah.
Like, it is the most amazing time with that person. They're so loving.
It's the worm on the hook, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Been there, done that. As in, having been in an abusive relationship, I definitely recognize the honeymoon period that you're talking about, the grumpy period, all of that stuff. And then it just turns into all-out madness toward the end. I never had the resources to seek out help for myself, and perhaps the sort of male bias in society prevented me from even recognizing it as such. I just thought it was a crap relationship. But quite honestly, like all of these hallmarks and all of these warning signs that you keep talking about, a lot of them were there, so it qualifies.
And we recognize that too, that in our culture, men generally are not supposed to talk about these type of situations, and it can be embarrassing to a man to say that they're in this type of relationship. And so that's one of the reasons there are many reasons why we believe women are victims more often, but we do think that our male victims are underreported for those types of reasons.
yeah, I believe that 100%.
Yeah.
And it's such a disservice to men that they've been trained to this point to not be comfortable and able to share their vulnerability and to be seen as somebody who can be aggressed on just as much as, women can be.
There's a great show called The Mask We Live In that talks a little bit about that type of situation. If I can find the link, I'll share it with you also, that you can put that in your resources. That is a really good
We're
one
gonna
to
add
watch
so
that
much
talks
to
about
this.
that.
Yeah, we're putting together pages and pages, as we go for like the How to Love Forever website. I want it to be more than just a place where you could just click on podcasts. It's a place where you can look at articles and learn lessons and have visual aids like the control and command wheels. No, wait, that's on my computer.
Power and control.
The
Power
and
and
control
control.
wheels. Yeah, I was like, no, wait, that's on my keyboard.
And there is an equity wheel too. So there is the opposite of that wheel that you
yay.
can look up. That's like, this is what a good relationship is supposed to look
So you
like.
can
And it's
compare.
called
That
the
was,
I love it.
that was one of my next questions. Are there graphics that can show you the good stuff? Yeah, that's good to know
Yeah.
too.
What to strive towards.
Yeah, examples.
So, hey, I know you need to go now. Can I ask you one last kind of close-up question?
For sure.
What got you into this line of work?
Why do you do what you do?
Oh goodness, that is a multi-level answer.
Well, you're a multi-level person.
We're
so
going to
that
keep
kinda-
you forever.
Yeah, so I've worked in the social service agency for a long time now. I am one of the lucky people that my parents were not abusive to one another. Just like any relationship, every relationship has levels of dysfunction.
Yep.
But my family, my parents were not. But I did see some of these relationships in extended family members. And my very first exposure to a domestic violence relationship was actually with one of my relatives as a teenager. So a teen dating violence relationship.
Oh.
And then moving on from there, getting into the social service work, working with children for many years. I worked in juvenile detention for a while, traumatic brain injury. And I noticed that there was a common theme that a lot of situations linked back to being in homes that had these type of situations occurring within the home. So, domestic violence abuser is 50% more likely to abuse their children. So a lot of the children whom I encountered were abused. Their parents were an abusive relationship. So I saw the link between all of those things. And then also being a survivor of sexual assault, that is also a power and control move, which is also highly linked to domestic violence relationships. And so it's all about the society in which you live and what they view as acceptable behavior. The society in which we live in particular sees oftentimes that the female gender is of less importance than the male gender. Now, we are obviously better in the United States than in many other countries. However, we still have many of these types of belief systems. It's why you see far less women in government. It's why we make less than men and all those things, right? And so for me, it's really this kind of combination of believing that we need to have a society that's equal. And domestic violence is in that realm of equality. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a very complicated answer. I could probably go on for a while discussing, but I saw these relationships and so many people surrounding me. And luckily, I've never been in a physically domestic violence relationship myself ever. I've definitely seen signs of situations and these red flags, but I've had a lot of family and friends who have been in these situations for sure.
Well, it sounds like you have a ton of stories and a ton of wisdom to share with people, and we're probably going to have you back.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Perfect.
Yeah, maybe we can do a progress report on the organization later on, things like that, under your amazing leadership. Again, congratulations on your new position.
Yes, thank you. I'm very excited to see what I can do to help people. Like that really, you asked me why I do this. And the number one reason is to help people. And so many different issues intersect with this particular issue. I mean, substance use is highly correlated with this issue. Just so many realms of social service overlap. And so it's a great space to be able to help a lot of people. And I've seen just amazing transformations in individuals when they came into our shelter, and I was like, oh my goodness, like, I'm not sure they're going to make it. Like, I'm really worried for them. And then they stop in our office 5 years later and own a business.
Man,
we have several survivors who own their own businesses, and I have 4 employees who are previous clients of ours. So
good on you.
That has to be incredibly validating and motivating to keep doing what you do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I know that you've got a very busy schedule today. I wanted to thank you very much for coming. And I know that you already laid on us a few links and a few wwws and all that stuff earlier in the interview. But would you mind just blurbing contact for your particular organization in case anyone in Clark County, Nevada is looking for a little helping hand?
Absolutely. So you can reach S.A.F.E House at our 24-hour crisis hotline at 702-564-3227. You can also look us up on the web. We're at www.safehousenv.org. And we also have our office. Our office is open 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. So if you just want counseling or advocacy and you don't feel like you need shelter, then you can call our office at 702-451-4203.
It's fantastic. And again, we will put all of that information in the show notes so to make it easier to look up. But thank you so much, Beth.
Elizabeth,
you're amazing.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad I'm part of this podcast. It's such an important aspect of it. So I'm excited that you called me up and invited me to join.
Oh, it's
Thank
our
you
pleasure.
for joining the community. This is what we're trying to do, is we're trying to create an army of love and decent relationshiping.
Yeah.
And so thank you so much for being part of that. And we're definitely going to be like, hey, you want to come back and play again?
There's so many more things I could talk about. I mean,
Yes,
it just goes on and on. The economic impact of domestic violence on the community is its own topic. So,
we can definitely put that on the calendar.
Yeah,
yes,
we'll
please.
put that on the calendar.
Yeah.
In fact, as many bits of input that you think are helpful for people out there, you're most welcome to. So anyway, I just wanted to stop the stammering and the mumbling and just say thank you again.
You're a rock star.
See you soon.
Thank you. So I didn't know if you wanted to stay on for a few minutes.
Well, I thought you
Big
had to
hugs,
run,
but
babe.
you got to go, right?
Oh, yeah, I got like 2. Wow, you were watching the time closely.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye, kids. Bye.
Well, that was an incredibly heavy episode, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But I think it was a pretty hopeful one.
Yeah.
Right? Knowing that there are so many advocates like Beth and her organization.
S.A.F.E House, Nevada.
Safe House Nevada, you guys are heroes.
And all of those advocates and all of those groups all across the nation, you're all heroes. Thank you so much for doing the work that you do. You're
Please.
saving lives.
Every day.
Props.
In addition to the organizations, all of the friends and the loved ones who see their person going through abuse and trying to find ways to help them, we see you.
We see you.
know.
And
It's hard.
It is hard. And your friends who are going through this, if you just reach out and lend a hand, they will remember you forever.
And we hope it gets better.
So, yeah, we ended up covering quite a lot of ground in this episode.
We absolutely did. Yeah, we talked about the red flags of abusive relationships, the power and control thing. Like that's what
Power and control wheel.
Yeah, the power and
The thing
control
I
wheel.
thought that I saw at the S&M dungeon.
I think that's a different kind of wheel.
Yeah, totally different kind of wheel. Yeah, we also talked about how common abuse is in people's lives. Like 1 in 4 people have been subjected to some kind of abuse in their lifetimes. That is an incredible statistic, and it's heartbreaking.
I mean, honestly, I just think about when I'm hanging out with friends, how many of us have experienced abuse in our lifetimes.
Right? And you don't just have to be a woman or a child. You can also be a man and experience this relationship. And I want to shout out to any man who's feeling like they might be under that category, because I'm just going to flat out say it, even though it isn't popular among men culture, that it happens to us. It happens to all humans.
And we are building a page on our How to Love Forever website to contain resources for those who are looking for help or looking for help for their loved ones. So hopefully men take advantage of that just as much as women do.
Yeah. And we understand that this was a difficult topic, but we do feel it's very important for all of us to be aware of what the red flags of abuse are and overall work toward creating a culture of healthier, more fun, more balanced relationship.
Yes, please. Those are the best kinds of relationship.
And these tools will help.
I agree.
Well, that's it for our show today. Thank you for joining us. And remember, you can always reach out to us on Facebook, for example, at facebook.com/howtoloveforever, on Instagram at how2loveforever.
And if you are so full of love, you got to show it in bigger ways. We invite you to join our community on Patreon. We have a range of relationship levels you can choose from. And the more committed you become, the more perks you're going to be getting. Go check it out, patreon.com. Join us next week when we explore the wild and wonderful world of alternative relationship structures.
Yes, it's a taxonomical journey through the postmodern romantic landscape.
Literally, something for everyone.
So until then, remember, love deep,
love hard,
love forever. Good dork.
I was like, you didn't do it together.
Why don't we do it together?
Do it together. We have to jump at the same time.
We're frauds because we're not doing it together.